Good afternoon. I am Mike Moeller, newly, I guess, elected president of Malice. So I want to thank you for that. I also want to take a moment and certainly acknowledge and thank Kathy Durbin for her years of service as president. She certainly went above and beyond. In my career, I've been in front of a lot of groups, and always in seminars was taught, never follow animals, don't go on Friday afternoon, and don't go on right after lunch. So 2 out of 3 aren't bad, but we're on right after lunch. As we have today, we've got a great panel, and I want to thank them for being here, and hopefully they'll attend my inaugural ball, which will be at Jennings Cafe in my beloved Catonsville, where they have half-price wings on Monday night. So that'll be a great inaugural ball. So now let's get to the matters at hand here. Again, we've got a wonderful panel with years worth of experience with us. We have Marshall Weston of the RAM Restaurant Association of Maryland, Jane Springer of the Maryland State Licensed Beverage Association, MSLBA, Nick Manis of the MBWA, Maryland Beer Wholesalers Association, and Kevin Addix, who does not have an acronym, so we're just going to give him GAF as part of the Grow and Fortify group, so he doesn't feel left out, not having an acronym in front or behind his name. So panel, welcome and thank you so much. We're going to cover a lot of territory in the next 45 minutes, and we will take questions via the chat line after you're finished. I will go in no particular order. I'll jump around so that you're not first every time and you're not last every time. So let's just start with just, if you could give everyone just a brief background. I know some people may have read your bios, but just take 30 seconds, 45 seconds, whatever, and just tell us a little bit about your background. We'll start with you, Nick.
Okay, my name's Nick Manis. I'm with a lobbying firm, Manis Canning and Associates. One of the clients we represent is the Maryland Beer Wholesalers Association. And when I say clients, we represent different entities before the Maryland State Legislature. With the Maryland Beer Wholesalers Association, we also do local representation and also do some federal work with them. The Maryland Beer Wholesalers was established in 1974. The first executive director was my dad, and I'm the second one. And we have 23 members, mostly family members, multi-generational family members. We also, of course, represent Montgomery County and look forward to the conversation. Want to congratulate you, Mike, as your new presidency, and look forward to working with you as always.
Thanks, Nick. I'll go across the line. Kevin, you're next on my screen.
Well, thanks, Mike. And again, congratulations to you as well. Big shoes to fill, fancy shoes to fill. Kevin Addix with Grow and Fortify. So I'm the founder of this organization that was built after 15 years of representing the Wineries Association and helping them with government affairs and marketing and communication. And the brewers and the distillers were interested in having their organizations brought to the same level. And 2015 formed Grow and Fortify to do just that. So in some respects, a lot like Nick, where I now have clients. My clients are the Maryland wineries, brewers, and distiller organizations, among other organizations we represent in the value-added agriculture sphere. And my background is in communication and publishing and education.
Thank you. Marshall, Restaurant Association of Maryland.
Good afternoon, everybody. I've been with the association coming up on 20 years. My background, I was in the restaurant business for a while, and like many restaurateurs, they decided to jump out and to get into something else, and that's kind of what I did. And we represent over 2,500 restaurants across the state, doing advocacy, interpretation and guidelines on regulatory issues, along with educational programs and other things. And our membership is not just restaurants. We deal with all food service businesses, food trucks, caterers, quick service, fast food, fine dining, the whole gamut of the food service industry. So it's great to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Marshall. And last and certainly not least, Jane Springer, MSLBA.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jane Springer. I'm representing Maryland State Licensed Beverage Association here today, who has been in existence since 1950. Actually, originally started out as Maryland Retail Dealers Association and later changed their name to Maryland State Licensed Beverage Association. I've been with them for the last 30 years, actually 30 plus years. Telling the age a little bit there, but started out with them in actually alcohol training. We ran the TAM program for the last 30 years. Right now, currently, we're not running the TAM program with COVID going on, but we are involved in all aspects of the industry. We represent about 1,000 beer, wine, and spirits retailers throughout the state. In some areas, we have local affiliates to address the local issues, and we're also part of a national association. So I'm happy to be here and be part of the discussion today, too. Met many of you over the years through our TAM seminars, and I look forward to the years to come. And again, congratulations, Mike.
Thanks, Jane. Well, Jane, I'll tell you, we'll stay right on you for this kind of first round of questions. And let's start with the obvious. How did COVID affect your organization and your members?
Well, that's pretty obvious, yes. As far as the organization, the restaurants, many of them have not fully opened, or some of them haven't even reopened. The bars particularly hit hard. Many of them don't even have food service that they were able to lean on as far as being able to offer food service to try and come up with some sales. Package stores were obviously very busy in the beginning, took a big hit. I think everybody thought they would never get alcohol again. So even people who aren't regular drinkers went out and made sure to stock up for whatever may come with the future. But that has leveled off now, and many of them are just trying to keep operating, getting employees, which is another problem across the board for all the retailers.
Marshall, this is just teed up right for you, unfortunately, about how COVID affected you. I think we're all well aware, but maybe you can offer some even deeper insights.
Yeah, I think that restaurants were really the poster child industry for how COVID really impacted businesses across the board, and our organization spent a lot of time making sure we were telling the story of restaurants and their employees and how they were affected, and how they are the backbone of almost every neighborhood and community that they're in. And because of that, we received a lot of financial help, if you will, from state, local, and federal governments to help keep the number of permanent closures down. At one point in time, we felt that COVID was going to lead to up to 40% of all restaurants in the state of Maryland closing permanently. Now, luckily, we haven't been anywhere near that number, and the number is probably under 20%. I think as time goes on, we'll be able to get a better handle on that. But that's how our organization kind of had to jump in and kind of help restaurants kind of get through all of this. But I think that the big thing that most restaurants did, and the thing that COVID affected most, is they forced restaurants to do things they weren't normally used to, and specifically takeout. And I think that the restaurants out there today who are offering takeout, that might not have been part of their business model over 18 months ago, but they learned that it had to become an important piece, and consumers now have grown to kind of like it and are accustomed to it. So that Italian restaurant where you always used to dine in, now maybe I can get a takeout meal just the same. So we continue to evolve as an industry because of COVID.
Marshall, let me just do a follow-up if I can. To your knowledge, is all the relief and PPP, is it out there, or is it still unallocated to your members?
Most members have that we talk to are doing everything they can to apply for every dollar that's available. And most of it has been used to our knowledge. In fact, the federal program, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund that is out there, $28 billion was allocated to that fund across the country. It was gone in less than 2 weeks. So there are plenty of restaurateurs out there that continue to struggle and are looking for financial help to get through this path back to normal. And we're not out of the woods yet, but most restaurateurs do feel optimistic, yet they do feel that a true recovery is probably 2 to 3 years away.
Okay, Nick, we'll slide over to you again. For your members, COVID, how did it affect the beer wholesalers?
Sure, just like everyone, it hit them hard with employees. Of course, like you heard, their off-premise business went up, i.e. the packaged goods stores, but the on-premise was non-existent. So a lot of the packaging changed where they used to sell kegs for on-premise. They were, again, non-existent. So wholesalers were left with, thousands and thousands of kegs. They had to eat a lot of it. Some finally, the brewers started, having programs to help them. But everyone thought that the off sale relieved the loss of sales from on-premise, but that just wasn't the case. So now we're seeing things get back to a little bit of normal. However, there's still a lot of suppliers that still aren't up to where they used to be with manufacturing. It's hard to find CDL drivers. So we're seeing a lot of shortages from that. Our members got very involved, like, they're family owned and operated. So they got very involved in the communities, helping the, restaurants get prepared meals to those that needed it. So we're still not back to where we were, but slowly and surely we're getting back. And if anybody knows or has any contacts that someone's looking for a job as a driver, please let us know, because we're in dire need of them.
Nick, as a follow-up to you, do your members, I encounter it in just everyday life of supply issues. Are your wholesalers seeing problems, in the supply chain?
Yes, I mean that's where it hits some brewers, some very large brewers, national brewers. There was no surprise, but in Texas, one of the Miller Coors brewery was shut down, and we have a lot of members now that there's a shortage of that. I went up to visit one of the Baltimore City distributors the other day for some smaller brewery items, and they're just hard to find. So, and they're trying to get back up. I'm sure we'll hear from Kevin where they had to. It was hard to find workers, and the productions were hard. So, yeah, it's a challenge out there. And of course, now we're in the summertime, which is the top tier for beer drinking. So people have to watch how much they order, because they can't just pick up the phone and order it for tomorrow. So they're checking their inventories and seeing what they have in order or on order, especially places like Ocean City, right? That they can't get all their back orders in September when they least need it. So, but the good news is let's say within Maryland itself, that you'll find, Mike, is everyone that's on this panel, we all work very closely together. So that's very helpful. And whether it's COVID or any other type of catastrophe that might come down the pike, it's a special industry, as you know. It's not bread, it's not water, it's alcohol. So, we work really closely with each other.
Yeah, good point. Kevin, so I'll turn it over to you. COVID, supply issues, how did it affect your members?
Well, COVID hit us in a whole bunch of ways. So in a lot of ways, what Marshall and Nick had noted, everything got tight. It got, for our folks who primarily sell on premise. So a lot of our breweries, their primary focus through their local licensing is selling for on premise consumption. Most of our wineries sell for, from the winery and some of that for on-premise, but some to go. Distilleries are all over the mix, but for the ones who really relied on people coming in and buying product, that went away. That was a hard shut off in March of 20, and it came back a little bit in the summer, but really only for the ones who had big outdoor space. You look at the farm in my background here. That's someone who has a farm brewery, and they were able to open up and have a lot of people come out. So that was a big issue. Production became difficult because supplies were very hard to get a hold of. There was already an aluminum shortage. Then there was a tariff on aluminum. So cans became, it was crazy looking at some of our chats between brewers trying to sell cans. One of our large brewery had an excess of cans that had a misprint on it, and they sold those cans to other breweries who put their labels on top of their printed label and filled those cans because they just couldn't find cans otherwise. And the same thing was happening with growlers and crowlers and malt and other things like that. Like Marshall, our members have applied for every kind of relief program, and most recently the federal restaurant relief program has been very, very helpful in keeping our folks open. We've had a number of our industry members close due to constraints around COVID, and I like to think that it probably wasn't COVID that completely shut them down. There were probably structural problems beforehand, but it was definitely the death blow.
Okay, let's turn. Thank you all. That's really good insight. Let's turn it, since this is kind of our MALA webinar, and I'll jump back to you, Jane, and just briefly, if you could just express how you see your organization, how it interacts with MALA, and the kind of positives, negatives, and wish list kind of thing.
Well, we have been interacting with MALA for many, many years, as I mentioned earlier, obviously with the training. But then when local issues come up, particularly on regulations or laws that occur in certain areas, especially if we think that there might be some statewide significance involved. So our members, we have members throughout the state, and again, in some areas, they have local affiliates that many of them probably attend the local liquor board hearings that you have, as well as the state legislative hearings, obviously. But on the local level, it starts locally, and hopefully we get the first word in there, because once it goes to state legislation, it's very difficult to try and work those things out and get your voices heard. So we encourage the members to get out and get to the local hearings.
Good. Marshall, how do you see it?
Yeah,
Your interaction with MALA, yeah.
Yeah, if you were to ask our membership what is one of the most important things that RAM provides for them, almost all of them will talk about regulatory and guidance and interpretation of the legislative agendas that are passed, and that's really where we can play an important role for our members in the industry as a whole. Is that it is so easy to go on to Google and just get information, but it's not necessarily the right information. It's not the right interpretation. It doesn't have the proper follow-up questions. And for restaurateurs, they are notoriously overworked and busy with the minutia of day-to-day operations, and they don't keep a great handle on regulations and laws when they change quickly, or even know that something is up for change. So that's where our organization steps in, is things that have been passed, we hopefully have had a seat at the table and can explain the point of view from a food service operation, but then really disseminating that information out to our membership the right way so that they can understand exactly how to follow the rules and the guidelines.
Good. Nick, same question. How do you see us intersecting and with your organization?
With the conference in Ocean City, that's the best, going down there and drinking out of a red cup like you're doing right now. But no, hopefully it's a cold beer. But if for us, as you know, the wholesalers are licensed and regulated on a state level, unlike the local level for the retailers. But with trade practices and things like that, whenever there are questions, we work closely with the organization. And I mean, I was joking with the Ocean City, but I mean, that's where, I would always go and meet up with the different licensing boards, because we don't come in as much contact with them as Jane and Marshall might, and as Kevin might be licensed on a local level. But we work closely together, and whenever there's possibly underage programs that we can participate in and help in, we like to do that also. So we look to be a partner and with the organization in any way we can.
Good. Kevin, I'll let you back clean up here.
Well, sure. I mean, I think it's been said already, but we look at ourselves as partners and resources. And, I've enjoyed being on the Friday calls. And even though not all of our manufacturers are regulated by local liquor boards, they are still selling and promoting alcohol in the community. And so, I like to provide that resource so that local liquor boards aren't confused as to what's going on. And as Jeff pointed out earlier, the laws are changing pretty frequently, and so sometimes at our begging, and other times just because that's the way of the world. The other thing that interactions with MALA have been great, just in reverse, is it's really illustrated to me and our group how important training has become. So we formed our own alcohol awareness program a year and a half, about 2 years ago now, and have trained over 280 members of the industry just in the last year. So we're very excited about that opportunity, and that's open to anybody who'd like to do it. But we look at liquor boards as partners, and certainly want to continue to be a resource.
Good. Let's stay on this kind of little bit of theme for a second, and I'll start this time with you, Marshall. Can you think of any steps that both your organization that you represent and MALA could take that kind of raises the level or benefits both organizations, yours and MALA? Are there any steps that you could see as where it could be improved upon from where it is today?
I think communication is probably the key issue across the board, and not just here, but in all organizations. We are all, just kind of inundated with information day to day across the board, and it's just not as simple as sending a letter nowadays through the Postal Service, and you consider the communication done. So I think that we all have to take a look at how we communicate with our members, with our clients, and our customers, and really evaluate how are we going to get the message to them, especially when it comes to changes, when it comes to educating and things of that nature. So I think we should always be on the lookout for being willing to just use the tools that are out there. Like it or not, social media plays a role in that. So how you communicate on social media is important just as much as picking up the phone and calling somebody who in today's world they may not even pick up. So that's where I think we all have room to grow.
Jane, how about yourself? Thank you, Marshall. Any suggestions of how we can make it better?
I would absolutely agree. Communication is key here. We get constant calls into the office asking about a proposed rule or regulation, or how somebody goes about a process, or particularly with COVID over the past year, constant calls about what they were or were not allowed to do. And typically you can do a lot of research. Obviously we employ Steve Wise, who's our lobbyist and legal counsel, and he's able to provide some interpretations. I know he's been on some of the MALA calls recently. But this was totally different territory, because so much was left up to the local jurisdictions. And if there's a way to provide that communication better so that we can also help to get that information out to the members, that would be very helpful. And we'd be glad to be a resource, and are open to any suggestions that you may have as well.
Good deal. Kevin, let me throw it down to you. How can we make it better? Any suggestions? How we could go about this and benefit both of us?
Well, I'll say that the institution of the weekly calls has been incredible. And I'm noticing that not just from being on the calls and hearing the conversations, but having conversations in Annapolis, and then also as our members are applying for licenses and a new permit has come up, it turns out the boards have heard about it and are educated about it, and that all goes back to Mala. So I appreciate that. What Jane said, I think the more communication, the better. The surveys have been incredibly helpful. And I like that the website's being built out so that, as information is being distributed, it can be posted there for permanent review.
Thank you. Nick?
Well, as stated, as you know, we're licensed and regulated on a state level. So we don't come in as much communications as the others, but, have no reason not to be included on calls if you'd like us to be, or be here as a resource both ways. Because they're, as you know, what used to be Article 2B and all the trade practices, we're, I think, the only state in the country that has local liquor boards. To my knowledge, I think everything else is done, centrally at their state. And everyone has different interpretations. And I've, even doing this as long as I have, I still don't know the answers to all the questions. Thankfully, we have someone like Jeff Kelly, that we can turn to.
Yes.
To help clarify some things. And legislatively, as everyone said, there's always issues that are popping up. We have Alcohol Day, of course, when all the bills are being heard. So, any help we can be, any resource we can be, our door's wide open. If there's any ideas that you all might have that how the beer wholesalers could better assist or participate, let us know, because we're all ears and willing to do whatever we need to do.
Good deal. Nick, I'll stick with you on this one and bring out this curveball, because you were rooting against my son's for University of Virginia against the University of Maryland. So I'm gonna pick on you first. So what is your fear, your organization? What keeps your organization up at night? What's the one or two, damn, that scares us?
I lost more sleep after Virginia beat us, truthfully, than I do on any legislative issue. Fortunately, my son was able to capture one championship, so that made me feel better. But I think from our standpoint, it's we're the middle tier, right? So we get the product from the manufacturers and deliver them to either restaurants or the packaged goods stores. And now with the advent of the general public wanting access to alcoholic beverages like they do, milk, water, or hamburgers, it's challenging to us from the standpoint is, why do we need a wholesaler? Why can't we just go online and order a case of beer from Amazon or anyone else, or have FedEx deliver from Texas a case of beer to their home? So those are the types of things that are coming down the pike. We've had, you joked earlier about the franchise, but we work with Kevin and his group to allow small breweries under a certain size to be able to switch wholesalers when they liked, with not having a reason why, just they wanted to switch wholesalers, which was a big deal for us, because what you do for in-state manufacturers and retailers, you have to do for out-of-state. So as I said, we have good relationships with our local partners, but out-of-state, they don't care about so much the Maryland citizenry. They care more about how much money they can make. And it's a dangerous product if it gets abused and if it gets in the hands of those that, under 21 years of age. So we've been here a long, long time since Prohibition. Prohibition is, what brought us industry into the forefront by having that separation. And so direct ship and those types of things are things that keep us up at night. Of course, also taxes and things of that nature, and the abuse of our product. When someone gets hit by a drunk driver, or you see people that shouldn't be utilizing our product, that's the worst thing that can happen to our industry as a whole. So those types of things, when I read about those tragedies in the paper, truthfully, that keeps me up more than a legislative issue.
Good, Kevin, and you're pretty much linked, different but linked with Nick. What keeps your members and you up at night?
Nick and I should get bunk beds because we're up at night for the same reasons, but from different angles of it.
I'm glad you said bunk beds and not one bed.
I mean, I'm open, Nick. Let's,
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We've come to terms on everything else before. So the two things that keep us up, I mean, obviously the abuse of product. For our members, we have something even deeper than that, which is new entities trying to misrepresent themselves as breweries, wineries, or distilleries. We have probably 3 of those a week that call us asking how they can look like a winery. And it's either because they want to have their own wine brand, but they don't actually want to do the work to be a winery, or they're in a county that won't let them have event venues or have people on their farms unless they are a farm brewery or a winery. And so they're trying to get in to do that. And we feel like we've put up all kinds of defensives to try to keep people from doing that. The other thing that really, really keeps us up at night is being out of sync with our consumer. Our industries are so incredibly sensitive to what consumers want, and because we're in large part tourism industries, we're not the local liquor store where the same person comes in every week and buys. We are places that people from around the state, around the region, around the country, around the world come to. When they're allowed to do something or buy in a way in another jurisdiction, and they're not allowed to do that here, that puts us at odds with our customer. And so, I know that we see, Jane and Nick and Steve and Marshall and everybody else in Annapolis, and we're, asking for stuff, and, here they come again. But it's not because we have these great ideas. It's because we feel like we're under pressure, either by, our customers, or by our members looking to see what's going on in other states and what incredible opportunities their peers in other states that we don't have, or that they have that we don't have. So those are the 2 big things that keep us up at night. I will say that one of the biggest things that we've dealt with was the franchise revision, and working with Nick on that, and Nick and his members on that. That's been huge. Is it perfect? No, because we still have breweries that get stuck in it. And so because, either they're bad actors and the wholesaler, they can't come to terms, or vice versa. So, all these things are evolutionary, right? Nothing is always done and it's done.
Okay, Jane, I'll slide over to you. Your thoughts, what keep your members up at night?
Well, many of the same things that Nick and Kevin have just spoke about. Obviously the 3-tier system is something that our retailers have, put their life savings into their establishments that they have now. And it seems like alcohol is everywhere these days, and everybody wants a piece of that retail market. But again, they've built their business based on how the laws currently are in Maryland, and that's what their models are. And alcohol consumption hasn't gone up, so those sales have got to come from somewhere. Another big concern that obviously I think everybody here knows about, because we've talked with local liquor boards and in the state legislature, is chain licensing, grocery store licensing. There's no way that we truly are local independent retailers out there, and there's no way they can compete with grocery stores. And I think that would come into play to cause problems for all three tiers, quite frankly.
Marshall, I'll let you back clean up on this one.
Yeah, I think what Kevin said is really important for people to remember when it comes to restaurants, and we are in sync with what the demands of what the consumer wants. And restaurants, you know, they have to be able to shift and change and adapt to the different tastes of consumers, whether that be menus or, you know, concepts or the way things are done. And in order to do that, it takes money, it takes capital, it takes time and energy. So what really bothers and keeps up our members is the landscape with what many of them feel are just kind of over-regulation and government stepping in and telling them how to run their businesses, and they're forever trying to get to a point where they understand the regulations, they adapt to it, and then something else changes, whether that be an increase in price or that be a restriction on something. But it's just not as simple for a restaurant to continually adapt to these kind of outside forces and deal with the consumer demands at the same time. And that's hard for a lot of people to understand when they go to a restaurant at 7 o'clock on a Friday or Saturday night and they see how busy it is, and everyone says, well, this restaurant has to be making all kinds of money. These people are rich. They don't appreciate the amount of money it takes to run a restaurant, the number of people that it takes to run a restaurant as opposed to other industries. So we're very cost sensitive. So when things change too much too quickly from a cost perspective, it really puts a strain on restaurants.
Marshall, if I could follow up, because I guess I'm one of the fortunate ones that have worked both sides of the street. Most of my adult life was on the sales side with Guinness and Diageo. And then the last decade or so, it's been on the enforcement, the regulation side. So I really get interested when you talk about, you used, and I'm quoting or paraphrasing, I guess, when you said about over-regulation and people telling them, mainly governments, I guess, how to run their business. Can you be specific? Because we're with Mallow. We're the enforcement and regulation arm. Can you cite specifics of where you see over-regulation?
Yeah, sure. When I was saying that out loud, the one specific example that I have in my mind, and we don't have it here in Maryland yet, but it's been talked about, is the idea of government intervention and telling a restaurant or a business how to schedule their employees. And you know, it is nearly impossible for a restaurant to be able to do an employee schedule 3 weeks in advance and know exactly how many employees you're going to need, exactly how many customers are going to come in, and being able to match those two things up. You know, here in Maryland, we have this thing called nor'easters that blow through every once in a while in the winter that can throw that, you know, out of whack. We have, our industry does a lot of catering and celebratory events, whether they be graduation parties, anniversary celebrations, and things of that nature. And sometimes those aren't scheduled as far out in advance as even we would like. So, to be penalized for not being able to get a schedule right 3 weeks in advance, it just shows a disconnect between government trying to mandate something without being in the business to know.
I'll be honest with you. And again, you've caught me to the quick when you talk about that the government's telling someone how to schedule. Can you again, I'm kind of don't mean to press, but I just got to follow up. Like, can you give a specific example? I have never heard of that, honestly. So can you tell me, can you give me an example of where that's happened?
Well, it hasn't happened here in Maryland. Just to be fair, this is something that has been talked about. But the idea is that if an employee is scheduled at such and such a time, 3 weeks in advance, and then if that schedule changes or you in any way, shape, or form, then the employer has to compensate the employee above and beyond when it comes to those changes.
Okay,
So,
okay.
for example,
Okay.
if your restaurant is shut down for
Okay.
3 weeks.
Okay, talking about compensation. Okay. Now it's, I'm a little slow. I'm a Catonsvillian, but I get it eventually. Thank you. Okay, it's kind of on the same vein, but let's talk about, I guess, opportunities or obstacles, because sometimes those two actually go together. And I'll go with you, Nick. Opportunities for your organization and obstacles to achieving it.
Well, the one thing is, I think our market's kind of what it is. Jane alluded to it, that, our consumption is what it is. And I mean, the only way that's going to increase is by more people. The difficulty, the obstacles we're having is packaged goods stores and restaurants are only so large, right? Their structures are only so big. And with the advent of, I think you've seen even in Maryland, Kevin, I don't know the numbers now, but the breweries that used to be, Hugh Sisson and Bill Muehlhauser down at Ram's Head, and now there's possibly hundreds of them. And, so the SKUs now, the amount of products people can buy, all of a sudden, Boston Beer was Sam Adams. Now, if you ask who Boston Beer is, it's Truly right there. I mean, seltzers are just flying off the roof. And God knows how long that's going to last. So now when our, wholesalers are representing these manufacturers, they're coming out with all these different products. Some require refrigeration in their warehouses, some don't. Some want cold trucks, some don't. Some want only in kegs. So it's, from our standpoint, it's more about managing the products and what's coming. Because you used to have, typically you would have a beer manufacturer just manufacture beer. Now they're getting bigger and they're seeing that seltzers are coming. Now they want to do seltzers. Now, because of, COVID, where if you told somebody to have a vodka tonic in a can, they'd be like, no way am I going to buy that. Now that's on the market now, and that's starting to pop. So, I think from us, it's more how to manage the current manufacturers we have with new manufacturers coming every day, and being able to, not overindulge the public. Because again, the one thing we have to remember is where, it's alcohol. And so one of the reasons the wholesalers were, brought about in the first place was so that the suppliers wouldn't overload the retailers with alcohol, and they would sell to anybody just to get the stuff out the door. So, I think it's being able to properly compete with all the different manufacturers, get the product out there while maintaining, some moderation and responsibility with who and what you sell to. Because, who would have thought that seltzers, Truly and Mike's Hard Lemonade and White Claw, and it's amazing the amount of, you go into a store these days and it's just amazing to me. So
I said to our board just yesterday, prior to a hearing, I said, I would bet you that there are over 400 SKUs on seltzer waters when you talk about line extensions and flavors and sizes. I said, it's, because I lived through it with Smirnoff Ice. So
right.
It's just, so Kevin, let me jump down to you. Obstacles and opportunities. What are the big obstacles your members face to achieve those new opportunities?
Well, look, Nick covered a lot of it. The obstacles that we face really, and again, this is our perspective as manufacturers, the obstacles that we face because we're so customer centric and trying to be responsive and flexible as we hear of new things and new products that are in demand that are, you know, coming out of wholesalers and manufacturers around the country. Our biggest obstacle is the inflexibility of Maryland law. And that's no one's fault. It's just, you know, when we came out of timeout after Prohibition, there were all these rules put into place that you can say help promote an orderly distribution and sale of alcohol. But nowadays we know that orderly distribution and sale of anything can happen in a variety of ways. I always like to think about it, and our members are pushing me to think about it this way. Let's look at the ask and figure out how we can make that orderly and safe to make sure that we're not promoting overconsumption, which our members don't, because our members' products, you know, if you remember, you know, where the concerns came from, which led to Prohibition, it was just the driving down of prices and the pushing and exponentially more availability of product. You know, I went to a retailer the other day. You know, I could go to my breweries and wineries to pick up product for a party, but I went to a good local retailer to buy it. I was shocked at the prices of some of my members' products. You know, $18 for a 4-pack of beer, $49 for a bottle of wine. And so, you know, I think we're playing in a different market. Our concern more is about how do we get that product to the consumer that wants it in the easiest, most efficient way. And sometimes, and I think this last year was a great example of it. And Marshall, you know, pointed to it earlier. The consumer didn't want to come to our places. And we had a problem with, a lot of our breweries had a problem with, and distilleries with selling their products during the early days of COVID through the retailers, because what happened, there weren't a whole lot of retailers that you could actually walk into. The liquor stores were meeting, you know, staff was meeting them outside at a table. What can I get you? And when you're talking to a consumer that way, it's brand recognition that comes into play. And our products in general, aside from the top 3 or 4 brands in each category, aren't brand recognized unless it's in front of them. They see the label, they're reminded about it. Oh, that's from Frederick County. I'm from Frederick County. Or there's an in-store tasting or something like that. So trying to figure out ways to meet the customer during COVID, and kudos to the wholesalers, retailers, restaurants, and our folks for coming together and working it out. And a big kudos to regulators, you know, Jeff Kelly and Mike and Kathy, you guys hosting these calls. We knew what the need was. And then when the governor signed executive orders, there was this terrifying moment, you know, hearing some of the discussions among liquor boards that they couldn't or weren't going to be able to figure out how to do it. And, you know, creating these more efficient, streamlined information coming down from the state, really kudos to Jeff Kelly for helping getting that moving.
We've got about 12 more minutes, and I'll come back to Marshall and Jane, but anybody on the call, go on the chat line, because we did want to have at least the time set apart. If you have a question you'd like me to ask, please put it in on the chat line, and I will ask it. So I'll go to you now, Marshall. Obstacles, opportunities. What do you see in order for your members to get to that promised land? What are those obstacles, and how do you overcome it?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that I don't think that most of our members see regulatory issues as an obstacle. They just want to make sure that they understand the landscape so that they can do things properly, and then they evolve and go from there. So from that standpoint, I think that's good news. That means that, you know, it's clear, it's communicated, and they understand the playing field. But I think from an obstacle standpoint, you don't really want to bash the customer, but there is a bit of that out there, because we've grown to just get things as we want, when we want them, and quickly. It's the Amazon effect, right? You just go on the app, you order it, and then, you know, at most 2 days, I have it. Restaurants are dealing with this with the idea that they feel like they're being they have to be all things to all people because they don't want to be able to turn anyone away. So, a restaurant that does a hamburger really well, next thing you know, they're doing chicken wings, and that might not be their thing, but that might be what customers want. If you think about it, we've seen this play out over many, many years where, brand concepts expand into things that don't necessarily seem to make sense, but they do because they're just trying to capture more market in some way, shape, or form. So, that kind of being all things to all people expands menus, expands what you do to a point that it may not make sense. And then certainly inflation and pricing kind of ties into that as well, because when you start getting your hands into more things, when prices go up, you're more exposed there. So, I think that's an obstacle that restaurants are really looking at.
Jane, I'll let
How
you
do
back.
they put themselves in the market without being so broad that they're being all things to all people, and what they do very well.
Oh, good point. Thank you, Marshall. Jane, I'll let you back clean up on this one. Anything new other than what these gentlemen added?
I was just going to say, I don't want to repeat the conversations because so much of it has already been said, but I will just add a couple points, just tracking on to what Marshall said about regulation. And again, our members, regulation isn't so much what their concern is, it's the change of those regulations because they do have just that one space of retail. So it seems like there's constant attempts to try and encroach upon that. And also just mention that our liquor store members were open throughout this entire pandemic, and it was very challenging for many of them. Most of them were working around the clock to do what they could, and then they were open 24 hours basically because they were cleaning during the time that they weren't open, but they were open and available and ready to sell the products. They just need to be able to get them. And obviously that was a problem with COVID as well, and continues to be a problem.
Okay, we'll wrap it up with this. And again, if anybody has any questions, please throw them in the chat line. I'll kind of finish up with the group. You guys have been great. I could do this for another hour, but where is your organization in 5 years? Is it the same? Is it changing? And what do you see it changing to? And I'll start with you, Marshall. 5 years, where's the Restaurant Association of Maryland?
Restaurants are going to look a lot different, I think. And that means our organization is going to be different. Historically, our membership has been the one location, independent, family-run restaurant. We all know who they are. They're in our neighborhoods and communities because they've been there for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. We are seeing fewer and fewer of those kind of restaurants. Just over time, they close and something else goes in their place. So instead of that being our core membership, I see really two different things. It's going to be the multi-location business owner that has 3, 4, 5 different stores, maybe even different concepts. Along that line, if you want to call them big operators, so be it, but they're probably not as large as you think they are. And then really it's the very small, independent, family run that is almost takeout, not in-person dining, it's takeout. And we see a lot of minority groups and ethnic groups. We call them dreamers. They come and they want to open a restaurant of their own. But it's not really a restaurant full service like we're used to seeing. It's more of a hybrid of focusing a lot on takeout, using third-party delivery, and maybe a couple seats as well. So we're really trying to figure out how we can serve both that large group and that very small group at the same time, when unfortunately we're seeing kind of the moving on of the one location independent restaurateur.
Jane, how about 5 years for the MSLBA?
Well, sorry, thought I was muted. 5 years from now, it's hard to tell, especially with the changes that have happened in the past year. But we're obviously going to be still out there fighting for the members and trying to maintain that dream ability for our local independent members that are there. But there's definitely changes that are coming about. We see it with the restaurants. We see it obviously with the packaged goods stores, and many people trying to move into some specialty areas to try and set themselves apart from others. So we basically want to try and help them navigate that change, find out what's going on in the marketplace. That's our vision for the future, and help the members to survive, to stay in the business, and to change with the times.
Good, thank you. Kevin, 5 years for your brewers, wineries, craft distillers.
Yeah, I'll be quick and say that it will be different because the product categories are shifting. The laws are allowing folks to produce multiple things, and many of our members are getting additional manufacturing licenses. So I'm even noticing at our different respective guild meetings, the same people are showing up to each because they now may hold a brewing, a distilling, and a winery license all in one. So we'll look different. I'm not sure where it's headed though.
Good. Nick?
Yeah, so our members, the majority of them are family, multi-generational. When I first got involved, now those individuals are retiring and pass it on to their kids or family members. But we will be here. I'm not sure what we will look like. As I talked earlier about the seltzers, who knows what's coming down the pike next. And, with cannabis going to be legal probably next year, what that has on the industry as a whole, that's, a big variable there. How it's going to be distributed, how it's going to end up in, alcohol or not alcohol, but whatever those drinks are going to be, as that's starting to get more populated. So that's going to be a big thing as we move down the pike. But as I said, we've been around a long time. They're family businesses. Knowing that they're passing them down now, I don't see them getting out of it. So we'll see. Every day brings on something new in this industry. So we'll see what happens in 5 years.
Thank you. I did have one question from one of our members, and we've got about 4 minutes, so kind of maybe be as brief as you can. How has COVID impacted the alcohol awareness training of your members? Marshall, we'll let you kick that off.
Yeah, initially when COVID hit, we expected fewer people and we expected big drops in the number of people doing alcohol awareness training, and also from the food side, the food managers, ServSafe training. And yes, initially that did happen, but actually the number of people keeping up with their training and doing training, those numbers stayed pretty steady and even increased at one point in time earlier this year. So I guess in anticipation of people coming back to work and restaurants really reopening fully. So it was a little bit of a surprise to us that the numbers really did stay up. So that just tells me that our members and owners and managers do find that it's important and valuable. So it was good to see that those numbers continue to remain strong, at least with our organization.
Jane, any words here on how COVID impacted the alcohol awareness training?
Yes, absolutely. As you know, we've done classroom training for the past 30 years. And I can tell you, Marshall, a lot of the business that you might have seen as far as increases come from us. I get easily 10 calls a day, people asking about our training. We typically train 2,000 people a year. And I have been referring them to the Restaurant Association because we do not have an online version available. We're looking at the possibility of getting into that business. Classroom training right now is still just very difficult. In the future, quite frankly, with all the programs that are out there now, I don't know if classroom training is going to be something that'll be affordable the way that we've done it in the past, especially with trying to compete with online training. There's obviously many different costs there. We're very concerned and want to continue to promote responsible alcohol service training, and obviously don't want to see underage people be served. So we are looking at alternatives. It will be a priority of ours. But again, this past year, well over a couple thousand people that we have not been able to train. I think quite frankly, we have not gotten the calls that we used to get because a lot of people haven't been up and operating. But even so, those that have been operating, particularly liquor stores that are doing delivery, that needed to get people training, I've gotten a lot of calls for that. New businesses that have come in that didn't previously have people certified. So it continues to be a problem, and we continue to look at some answers for that.
Yeah, and
Kevin?
if I could, just following up on what
Sorry,
Jane
Marsh.
said, the idea of online training, it's almost necessary at this point in time, because over this past year, I think everyone has learned, how to deal with things remotely and in an online format. And it really provides us an opportunity to get even more people trained, because making it easily and readily available is the key to getting it out there more. And I think we've learned in this past year, we can all do it and do it in the right way.
Good. Kevin?
Yeah, I'll second what Marshall said. And I mentioned earlier, we started our own program that deals specifically with a lot of the manufacturer related and manufacturer specific rules. And it was developed as a classroom and an online, and thank goodness we did the online as well, because during COVID, it was the only way to do it. And because we had new delivery opportunities, and you had businesses expanding what they were doing and staff in new roles, it was necessary to have that training, and it's been a godsend to have it online. So that really does need to continue.
Nick, you're a little different. Your guys are a little different, but still COVID affected everyone. How about their training?
Right. So as you know, they do a lot of the manufacturers have their training programs. So it really didn't curtail them, to that degree. Some would take Jane's courses on top of what they would get from the manufacturers or the wholesalers themselves. So of course they were impacted, but overall, not as much as some of the other industries.
Well, team, thank you. The acronym team here and Kevin, but I'm giving you an acronym, Kevin. Now, thank you, Marshall, Jane, Nick, Kevin. You guys are a wealth of information, and thank you. Like I say, I could sit around. We just wish we were in a bar to sit around, and keep this conversation going. So, or a winery, whatever. So I'll turn it back to my new Vice President Kathy Durbin.
Like a big circle. The circle of life, the circle of Mala. Thank you, Mike, and thank you all very much. A great presentation, and it's just the need for communication, and anyone on this call now has these contacts for folks that they didn't even have before. So we'll keep communicating. I think that for all of us, because of the different types of customers we have now, it's moving, it's transient. As much as we can talk together to get these messages out, the better for all of us. So
Kathy, just real quick, it's Nick. Feel free to share my contact information with all the members in case, they might have a questions that as it relates to wholesaling, now or throughout the, year or years. I'll be more than happy. They can just call direct and be more than happy to answer any questions they might have. And just one last, what time is the inaugural ball start on Monday?
I don't know. That's up to Mike.
Unfortunately, since I am I'll be in there for the senior citizen discount because I qualified, unfortunately.
So early.
Well, thank you very much. I got to run to an ECM hearing, believe it or not, so virtually. So unless you need something else, I'm going to sign off, but thank you so much.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Take care. Okay, thank you, everyone. So what a year it's been, or year and a half, I should say. At times it felt like sometimes the world was going to stop. It was crazy. The pandemic really influenced all of our lives, but somehow we connected and managed through the innovations that we created. As mentioned a couple times today, the weekly Mala communication call became and remains a great source of connectivity. And while there is no formal agenda during this call, we have lots to discuss and learn from each other. Innovations are rapidly changing our landscape. Just this morning, Apple announced the company will soon add digital driver's licenses to the Apple Wallet, The new integration will allow you to scan the your current license and store a digital version in the wallet app. You know, I'm not sure what this is going to mean for the world of identification, but it's big news. So a lot's changing. So during our final panel this afternoon, we will discuss some of the innovations and technologies created to provide continued customer service, all of which they can be shared. And I would like to ask the panel to make sure all their cameras are on. Let me check. I see. Oh, hi, Nick. I see Nick. Oh, all I had to do is push that little arrow. Hi, everyone. I see Dawn and Barb and Bailey and Missy. Great. Perfect. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So first up is Nick Blendy, who serves as the Deputy Executive Director for the Board of Liquor License Commissioners of Baltimore City. Nick, could you please share some of the COVID experiences, or as I like to refer, or I call them sometimes the COVID accelerators you experienced in Baltimore City this year or last year and a half?
Sure. Happy to do that, Kathy. Good afternoon, everyone. Nicholas, wow, I feel like I'm saying, for the record, Nicholas Blendy, Deputy Executive Secretary of Baltimore City. Yeah, fortunately, COVID experiences, not on a personal level, have managed to avoid catching the disease. However, I'm sure many of you in your offices, we have had, because we're obviously a forward-facing agency and required to conduct inspections out in the community, and turned out to be the de facto enforcement mechanism for the various mayoral executive orders. Because while the health department, issues citations, the one citation that folks seem to be most afraid of and most responsive to is when they get a liquor license violation. So that has been an interesting experience. And we've had 2 of our inspectors have tested positive. Fortunately, everyone recovered. But yes, certainly that's just the tip of the iceberg of things that have been experienced by our agency during the COVID pandemic. And I'll note by starting, I was in the mayor's office up until January of the year. So my predecessor, who many of you remember, Tom Akris, he and our board did, and along with the rest of our staff and our executive secretary, did tremendous work in adjusting on the fly, keeping folks doing tasks and figuring out how to solve these problems, as I'm sure we've all experienced in our agencies throughout the state. I'm going to try and share the screen and see which screen gets shared. It lets me choose. Perfect. Does everyone see that? My presentation thing. Cool. I'm very bad at PowerPoints, so it's going to be very boring, but I'm not going to talk about what's on the thing. Just want to use it for illustrative purposes. So one of the huge challenges we face, like everyone has, is how do you conduct your business when your office is closed to the public? Unlike other city agencies in Baltimore City, we are not located in a city-owned building. Therefore, we are subject to the whims of our landlord as far as what they're comfortable with protocol. So the 3 big areas that we had to figure out and adjust that I would say in the COVID pandemic is how to deal with the administrative application process while being closed to the public, and the related challenges of the U.S. mail, how to conduct inspections when there's a competing series of executive orders changing on the fly, and how to keep our employees safe as they do that. And then finally, how to conduct a liquor license hearing, whether it be for a new application, a transfer, or a violation. So I just want to show some examples of how we did that. Much like many of my counterparts, and much like certainly our city council and our Baltimore City Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals and our planning commission, we went to a virtual platform sometime in May of 2020. We basically canceled all hearings scheduled for late March and April as we tried to figure out what to do. So we've been using WebEx for the variety of hearings that we hold, and it's been largely successful, and we continue to do so as we are not yet open and operating, and the mayor is just starting to get to a timeline that he's going to share with the agencies about when City Hall will be open to general public for hearings, because we do conduct our in-person hearings in the Board of Estimates room in City Hall on the second floor. So with that, I just want to show some examples. For WebEx, I gotta move my scroll over to this screen. There we go. For an example virtual hearing, we basically open our presentation to the public, and we do stream live on Baltimore City's Charm TV, which is channel 25 in the cable, and we're live on the website as well. We go over these ground rules. I'll just use the April 15th docket as an example, and we very clearly explain to the public what the expectations are. We talk through everything. It's about a 3-minute presentation that goes so everyone's on notice. This is an example of the instructions. The board has adopted, notably, a 48-hour rule for these online hearings, right? Our commissioners are operating from their houses, usually, or their offices, and they need these materials in order to review them in time for the hearing and for everyone to be on the same page. Well, obviously, you can't be taking an in-person submission from an attorney holding up the piece of paper up against the screen, right? That's not practical. So we adopted a 48-hour rule wherein everyone who wants to have something considered at a hearing turns it in. So that's one change that has been pretty significant. A lot of our more familiar attorneys had to learn to adjust to new rules. And then we post an example of what the short docket would be, which is this was from a violations hearing. So you can see the charges that were up. And so that's on the screen as we describe things to the public. And then similarly, we post the long docket for the specifics of behind a charge and all of the things. It's all public information. So it's just now it's up on the TV 25 screen for consumption live in real time, whereas before you were watching the hearing take place. And then so that's the biggest example of the challenge. And so we learned what works. A lot of folks do enjoy the virtual hearing. Certainly the attorneys who would like to be on vacation enjoy the opportunity to be in Ocean City or wherever in July, knowing that they can still represent their clients well without having to take a trip back to Baltimore on a Thursday morning. But the bigger challenge that we've experienced is we do not have a forward or a web-based public-facing application process. So we still conduct everything old school paper with required notarizations for perjury purposes. And with the mail delays, that has been extremely challenging for our staff because very often there will be an application that will be missing a requirement. Obviously, we're 25 separate local licensing boards, I think, right? If the counties plus Annapolis. So as we all know, the alcoholic beverages article in Maryland is very, very unique to each local licensing board, and Baltimore City is no exception. So, for example, certain licensees in certain legislative districts in Baltimore City are required to submit a food form by an accountant who conducts a calculation of how much sales were food and certifies it because there was a belief that was founded among many community members and other licensees that certain establishments that held licenses that were primarily for restaurants weren't really operating with like a functional kitchen and one order of chicken tenders on the menu while from your one fryer while you're serving 100 people, lots of club style, cocktails. That's not really in line with what your license is supposed to be. You should have gone after the appropriate style license for that. So then you have a licensee be like, wait, but I was closed for most of 2020, so I'm not going to be able to show any sales. And you have to figure out and make decisions on the fly. Just submit us the form and note that you didn't sell anything, but the law requires it and we cannot process your application. So I'll move into the going virtual moving forward, what we've learned. We also have a pretty robust community outreach program. We have a full-time employee, Matt Achhammer, who's our community liaison. And what he has reported is that the quantity of meetings he's been able to attend in the virtual neighborhood association meeting environment has grown exponentially, but you feel like the quality of the meeting may not have that same level of caliber, interaction with the failing technology. There's also an equity question, right? Certain neighborhoods don't have the technological and internet service provisions that, don't come into play when you can just meet in person. So what I have the question up there, based on our conversations on that, would we stay virtual full time? Probably not, but maybe hybrid, right? I think many of the neighborhood associations will continue to want to do that. Then we go to virtual hearings. As I described, it's been largely working out well. Will it be the only way we move forward? Again, probably not, but potentially a hybrid calendar, depend as our mayor has indicated and is requesting from various agencies all throughout the city. Should we go back to the way things were before the pandemic? Should we continue to do things exactly as we adapted during the pandemic, or should we figure out somewhere in the middle? And I think, you've heard a lot of that on previous panels, and you're probably going to hear about that from the rest of the panelists on this panel. And the answer, I think, will be, we would recommend that we do somewhere in the middle, because for the next one, virtual office hours, no, I mean, we could conduct meetings and schedule a conference call, or now we can do a WebEx or a Zoom as everyone's gotten more familiar with that, and that might raise the level of interaction quality as you talk an applicant through some question and answer. But the reality is we're a public facing agency. The public deserves the right to be able to come in and have a meeting one-on-one and go over some issues. And sometimes you just can cover a lot more when you're in the room together and get that level of personal interaction. And lastly, I referenced this before, and I was unable to show any, because it's still being built, virtual applications. I know a lot of or at least some of my counterpart colleagues throughout the state local licensing boards, they do have some version of web form access. What we had made a decision to do was, right now you can just go download the PDFs of our application and review anything that we've uploaded. We have an online library, but we made the decision back in the fall of last year to engage a cloud-based developer to go ahead and migrate our legacy application system, license database, and inspections database into a one-stop shop. We're building it. We're hopeful that it will be live in the fall, and it'll certainly be live in time for our next renewal cycle, which we run March 1st to March 31st. It's going to be similar to the way I would describe it. Baltimore City has an electronic permitting for its building permits and electronic plans data platform for the same thing. And I think it's going to be really exciting. And I think it's going to be efficient, going to create efficiencies, because rather than chasing someone for that missed food form that I referenced, you would not be able to hit submit if it triggers a gatekeep, right? Like, oh, that's District 46. They're required to have a food form under alcoholic beverages 12-22, whatever. And that will be helpful, and it'll certainly be helpful for an auditing standpoint, because we also wouldn't be able to collect any money. And right now we have folks mailing an application in with a check, and we have to check to make sure that the application is complete before we then process that check, because we've made a decision that we won't take anyone's money for an incomplete application, because that just leads to accounting challenges. But certainly going to a largely virtual online platform will present tremendous efficiency opportunities, tremendous audit assistance, and ideally a good dashboard database where the public and anyone can see what's happening at any given period of time. Before the pandemic, we had about 1,264 licensed establishments throughout the city of Baltimore, from the whole gamut of microbrews to restaurants and everything in between. We'll be able to have that tagged with GIS data from the city's GIS, and it should present a very, very clear picture, and should just inform the public and our elected officials in a way that'll probably help us continue to grow and adapt, as we know is going to happen. With all that, I'm pretty much done to go to questions, or the rest of the panel can go and do questions at the end. But lastly, I want to point out that we will never, ever go to virtual alcohol, because there's no substitute for a cold beer when the Orioles win. So thank you.
Thank you, Nick. This is great. And all of it sounds very familiar. So I think a lot of us are dealing with some of the same issues, but also trying to step up, especially because of what's happened in the last year and a half. Kevin, I do see your question about a central online licensing system. That's a big question that would be probably bigger than this forum, but definitely a Friday call. We've tried to use similar systems just to other sister and brother agencies within our system, the county system. And there's just so many bells and whistles and so many different tweaks and different types of licensing and politics and everything. But that's the short answer. Yes, Nick.
Yeah, I can say that going through the contract negotiations with the web developer, that was something that we learned. Our law department had significant questions of indemnification and control of the data and data security, especially given that Baltimore City had the ransomware attack a year ago. So I think it's going to be very challenging things to think about working through. Sorry about my phone.
That's okay, but all great conversations and great questions, because they're the first thing that we think of is why can't we do more things alike? But I think we're going to get there. Some of these conversations are going to help. So thanks, Nick. So next up we have Dawn Sugars, who joined the Frederick County Liquor Board in April of 2017 as a part-time administrative assistant. Within 2 years, she was promoted to full-time Frederick County Liquor Board employee. That transition allowed Dawn to become a certified alcohol awareness trainer. Dawn, Frederick was the first, I believe it was the first jurisdiction to work with the state to implement successful virtual trainings during the pandemic. So please share your story. Yeah.
All right. I don't have a slideshow, so I won't hold up it. I just won't hold up anything else, but I appreciate and I'm very honored to be here today. I spent a lot of time getting to know everyone on this panel and on the Mala calls, or Mala, however you say it, Mala, and understanding that the alcohol awareness, the need became, and when you guys asked me to speak, what were the needs that were in the community or in the state in its entirety? Is this virtual platform for training? And with the virtual platform, I faced a lot of challenges, not only from getting the state to understand proctoring and what the abilities I could create to proctor those tests in person, because that's what COMAR states in the law, is that we must proctor in person and what's considered in person. And as Nick referenced, like this hybrid platform would be nice to be able to keep within the state so that we can also offer the in-person, but offer also hybrid as well. I have to thank my peers in the Mayo call. There is no way these challenges that we faced that I would have been able to get through these obstacles without having those resources. The resources were just, I can't even put it into words how much they meant to me, and how grateful I am to all those peers who gave me those platforms to work from. Marty Johnson, Bailey, Barb, we did some mock-up classes that were fun. Same with Marty Johnson, Kathy, Debbie. All of you guys were a resource for us to be able to springboard our first virtual platform for Frederick County. And we were able to also then get statewide permits so that I'm able to train other counties who can't get that virtual platform. I take this privilege very seriously. I have, of course you can't see here, but I have 3 other screens, or 2 other screens, 3 total, where that I can watch someone come onto the screen, do the training, have my test on another screen, and be able to watch people and mitigate any type of issues or cheating, because that's what the state, how are you going to mitigate that, Dawn? Lou Berman asked me that a couple times. How do you mitigate that? And again, we keep very focused and very engaged with our audience. That's very important to me. It's not about a slideshow. It's not about just teaching a class and giving a certificate. It's important to me, and I'm very passionate. I don't want to get my hands going here too much. I'm used to teaching virtually and doing things with my hands. So I get very passionate about making sure that something sticks, that they walk away from this class learning something. Again, very, very important to me. It's a very important privilege that I've been allowed to have. And I'm hoping that the state will allow us during COVID, because of the changes and the challenges that come with COVID, I am hoping the state allows us to keep this hybrid platform where some are in person, some are hybrid. Whether they want to wrap something around that as far as keeping it limited, I'm okay with that. But I know Lou and I have been in conversation about how to keep this virtual classroom platform alive. So that is a goal of mine, is to keep that alive. I've trained over 575 people since I've started this. In 2019, I trained over 1,500 people. So that tells you the impact that COVID had on the training, is it did reduce the amount of people who were able to train in person, but the virtual platform created that connectivity and that, I want to say, the ability for people to do it in the comfort of their home and the safety of their home, or whatever office setting they may have. So I've also been able to land a lot of people in that particular aspect as well. So with that being said, I don't want to talk too long. I'll hand it off to the next person or whatever, if anybody has any questions.
Okay, thank you. Wait. Now I'm unmuted, right? Okay, thank you. Sorry. This is like, I'm trying to balance it all and not get in your way while you're talking, but thank you so much. You've done a great job. And I think that those mock sessions were very important to all of you, and has helped folks as they're trying to continue trainings or begin trainings around the state. So Bailey and Barb, Bailey, I'll start with Bailey has worked closely as a contractor for Montgomery County Alcohol Beverage Services for the past year. We're so happy to have Bailey on board assisting us. She's been collaborating with Cooper Communications. She created and is implementing a state-certified virtual alcohol awareness training, the responsible beverage service and policy training. And Barb Cooper is the president of Cooper Communications, a social marketing and communications company which specializes in assessing challenges, applying strategies, and achieving solutions. So good afternoon, ladies. I don't know which one's going to be presenting, or if both of you are going to be presenting, but I'm glad to have you both here.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go. Okay, well, hi everyone and welcome. You know, we welcome the opportunity to introduce you to Montgomery County's Responsible Beverage Service and Policy Training, or as we like to call it, RBSP. Kathy brought Bailey and I together almost a year ago to create a uniquely tailored program that would integrate alcohol awareness state certification content into training for new audiences. We were also tasked with integrating technology in the face of COVID. And RBSP, as a result, is a state-approved online training delivered to meet the parameters required by the state of Maryland. Since its launch in January 2021, we've conducted training with 7 unique audiences, and I'll be getting into that in just a minute. And some are coming back for more. For example, we've conducted an additional 7 separate trainings for the Montgomery County Revenue Authority that controls all of our public golf courses. And this has really given us a unique opportunity to understand the alcohol-related challenges associated with this environment. And on top of that, Bailey and I have made some really good friends with all the golf courses. I think we could probably get some free golf out of this, perhaps at some point. We're really proud of what we've accomplished, regardless of the audience, and the feedback from our audiences has been pretty consistent. Before the presentation today, I pulled out some testimonials from the folks who we've worked with. And this comes from the retail stores, for example, which is an important part of the way alcohol is delivered in our county. Excellent. Let's have more of this training. And then from our friends at the Revenue Authority, very informative. And this is really interesting. I'm completely new to all of this. So while it may be review for others, for me, it was a good learning experience. And I think a statement like that is incredibly telling in terms of educating audiences that typically don't have access to the kind of information we're providing. Here's another one from our friends at the parks. Lots of great information for making sure alcohol can be consumed safely on park property and how to handle challenges as they come up. Various scenarios with guests who may try to either drink underage or drink too much. Students have essentially told us that they love the fact, very similar to what other folks have been saying today, that they can do this class online out of the comfort of their own homes. They don't have to go anyplace, saving them time. And also they like the fact that they're taking the class with their colleagues. Really, really important. But you know what? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So here's where our story begins. Hey, Bailey, can you switch? Thank you. This class is due in part to funding through a generous grant given to Montgomery County by the National Alcohol Beverage Control Association, or NABCA. The vision, as our tagline states, was essentially to create capacity through education. We also didn't want to compete with other training programs like TIPS or TAM. We didn't want to do that. So with this kind of vision in mind, our audience became very obvious. We wanted to provide training to Montgomery County related agencies that do not traditionally receive tailored training and whose primary function was not serving alcohol, but they also provide other hospitality services to residents. Very important. And the agencies we're talking about, the parks, which again are now in our community in the business of allowing alcohol into the parks through the Picnic in the Parks program, and the park police as well, who do undergo some form of training, but not alcohol awareness training. The golf courses, as I mentioned, the retail stores, Montgomery College students who are really kind of the new leaders of tomorrow as it relates to alcohol awareness, who were studying for a certificate in hospitality management. We also have in our group of trainees regional theaters connected with Montgomery County, such as Black Rock Theater Center, AFI, Strathmore, and Only Theater. As a matter of fact, we're in the process now of arranging for training of those organizations in the next couple of weeks. The format, we're looking at a 4-hour online Zoom training using technology tools, one of which Bailey is going to be demoing in a few minutes, and a proctored exam modeled after Frederick County's Safe Alcohol Service. So thank you, Dawn. A big shout out to you for allowing us to participate in your training so we could really see how a successful program operated online. We placed the spotlight in our class, providing historical information on how we got here, focusing on prohibition and the control and license systems and what the differences are between them. We also offer up county-specific information outlining what makes working and living in Montgomery County unique. And that's particularly important given the fact that Montgomery County is a control jurisdiction. And as Bailey likes to say, we are kind of the island because we're surrounded by a lot of licensed jurisdictions. We also include participatory breakouts, including situations that our audiences most likely encounter. How we manage this class, RBSP, as I like to say in our training, Bailey is really front of house. She created the curriculum and delivers most of the content. And I'm at the back of the house, handling the registration, Zoom, maintaining contact with agency leadership, that kind of thing. you know, it's been an absolutely amazing experience on so many levels. And Kevin, I'm kind of reminded with what you were saying that this online, this ability to deliver class online has just been phenomenal for us. And COVID has really given us the opportunity to think outside the box, and it's stretched us technology-wise in terms of how to engage audiences in new and unique ways. And it really has enabled us to reach audiences that truly need guidance, you know, when it really comes to policy and practice. And finally, a shout out to you, Ms. Bailey, because collaborating with you on this innovative program has just been amazing. It's been so much fun.
Back at ya.
Yeah, I know, it's been great. And Bailey is kind of, you know, what do we call each other? The
Partner in crime.
Partner in crime. So Bailey, I'm kicking it over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Barb.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to show you right here sort of our little sample agenda of what a class looks like. Now, it's going to vary a little bit towards the end based on which kind of group that we're teaching. So although we always make sure that we meet all of the guidelines for the state certification, sometimes there's areas we really need to hone in on depending on which groups we're teaching, or we might add some supplemental stuff that we think, like for situations that they're likely to encounter, any unique policies that their workplace has, things like that. But we start off with icebreakers just to get everyone warmed up and make sure that people are comfortable participating. We try really hard to make sure that everyone keeps their cameras on the whole time just so that they're engaged with us. And then we move into teaching all about prohibition, which is like one of our favorite sections to talk about. And Barb and I have both gotten really into like Boardwalk Empire and all kinds of different like documentaries and stuff about prohibition because it's such a fascinating time. And then we kind of move into the present where we are now. We focus a lot on Montgomery County, but also we look into some Maryland things as well. And then we move into what I always call the meat and potatoes, which is all of the alcohol's effects, signs of intoxication, all of the sciencey parts of it, and what to look for in your guests. And then we move into the next section, which is, I always call it like the actionable part, or taking ownership, where now that we know what to do when we recognize intoxication, what are we going to do now? And this is also where we focus in on IDs, liability, sort of your responsibility as someone who's either selling or is around alcohol. And then, like I said, that last section, we really focus on why their workplace is unique. Then they let us know how we did, and then we take the exam. All right, now, how we kind of did this whole training, Barb and I spent several months trying to get it just right, and we're both very particular, so it took a while. Definitely got a lot of help from Dawn and from Kathy, and I took a lot of the content, well, most of the content from already previous the store alert training, which had a lot of this info in it, and then I kind of beefed it up with stuff that I have from working within the industry for so many years, and also I'm a tips trainer, so I know some of their concepts as well. And then before the trainings, we met individually with leadership from each agency before we really dove into the presentation and bringing it together. So we met with MCRA and talked to them about what their biggest training needs were, what scenarios are your employees likely to come across. And then we figured out how to create those scenarios and turn them into exam questions or discussions for their breakouts. This is sort of to kind of take the place of the role playing that happens in a lot of the in-person trainings, so that they have that moment to get away from the teachers and all talk together and see if they actually understand what we taught them. And then they come back and talk to us about what they came up with. And yeah, we also ended up taking Dawn's class, which was really fun. I learned a lot that I didn't know that we then included in our training, like the whole pyloric valve thing that we love to do that you taught us. And then so once we did that whole thing, we met with everybody, and then we would go in, we'd make our training. And then after the training, once we got through training the whole group, so for MCRA, are we done with them? We might have one more group.
Yeah, I think we might have one more group, yeah.
There's always more. But then we meet with that agency leadership again to talk to them about maybe questions that came up a lot from their staff. like concerns that they had or common issues that they come across that there's no sort of policy or practice for. And Barb and I would always come at it from, look, this is how we're teaching it. This is our advice. This is as much advice as I can give you based on the policies that are in place in the county already, but we'll talk to leadership and try and see if they can implement a policy for you. And that was just like a really cool part of the training. It was really interactive for people. And I think that the trainees enjoyed kind of having a voice in the whole thing. They didn't just like sit there and listen, but they actually got to tell us, hey, these are the things that we're really worried about. And also lots of like funny stories. Like the one at the golf courses, we were talking about people sneaking in outside alcohol. And one person shared that one good way to tell is if someone's lifting up their club bag and really struggling to pick it up because they're not that heavy. And it's they found that and somebody had snuck a ton of cans of beer into their thing and he noticed because he was struggling to pick it up. Anyway, after that, we send out our debriefing notes with any of our sort of recommendations to all of the leadership. And we also send out our handouts to all of the participants in the class, our contact info if they need us again, and then also additional resources that people can look into. Barb kind of already went over this. These are just the agencies that we trained. It seems like each agency we trained, it would open up a whole new world, and we ended up training way more than we originally thought that we would, which was pretty cool. Like we definitely didn't plan on teaching the park police, but that was one of the more interesting groups. And then, so we trained and certified just north of 200 people. So this is sort of a little bit of a breakdown of different like job roles that we ended up certifying. So managers, cashiers at the ABS stores. We have our Montgomery College students, park police, owners, park employees. So kind of all over the map here. All right, and now I'm going to show you all our polling software that we use. This is just to keep everybody really engaged during the class. So the way that this is going to work best is really going to be if people are watching on their computer and then they have a phone that they can do this on. But you're going to follow the directions there. So click on whatever browser you have, whether it's Safari, Google, and then type in mykeypad.app in the address bar.
RBSP.
Yep, and that's going to be your meeting ID. I have a little screenshot there of what it should look like. And then you hit connect. And then you should have a little screen pop up that says no current question. Oh, sorry, that doesn't really work. I'll give you all a minute.
And Bailey, we have a lot of people. Oh, we have a ton of people. So just so you know.
Okay, I'll wait a couple minutes. And also, this is usually a part that sometimes we take a couple minutes to get this set up for everybody because we are teaching people that are sort of all over the place with where they're at in terms of technology. So some people have a little bit more difficulty with this, but for the most part, people really tend to love it. It keeps them engaged. And then this is sort of the area where we would troubleshoot anybody that's having any sort of issues, which I know Dawn also has to do a lot of that troubleshooting. It's always fun. All right, I'm gonna go to this first question. So this should pop up right on your phone and then you can just click on your response.
We'll see if this group is the same as the other groups. It'll be curious, Bailey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, pretty consistently, the answer was the same, always, the winner. And then if you look in that lower corner there, it shows you how many people have voted. So right now it says 14. So usually I can tell by watching, because I know how many people are in the class, I can tell how many people are participating. And then if I'm noticing that that number is not reaching the amount of participants, that's when I'll usually call people out like, oh, looks like I'm still waiting on 5 people to pay attention.
Or Mike Muller, why haven't you responded?
Yeah. All right. So this is a cool part of KeyPoint. This is one of the features. So I can immediately pull up my results.
See, there it is again.
And, Blue has consistently been the winner, except for in one class, if anyone was wondering. So thank you all for participating. And then this is just going to be an example of an actual question that we have on there. Let's see how many of you get it right.
This section of the class is so much fun, Bailey, when you talk about this.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Barb.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right, and then we have it so that it pops up with what the correct answer is so that we can talk about it with people and if they have any questions. And then usually all of these questions that are kind of like peppered throughout the presentation are really close to what the exam questions are, so people are already really familiar with the content. All right, and now, like I said, at the end of our presentation, we always have them give feedback. They're all typically very honest just because it's all anonymous. So I always tell them, you can be brutally honest with me. If I have to cry into my pillow later, at least I won't know who it was that didn't like me. So anyway, this first off, they rate us on how they thought we did, basically. So our knowledge of content and industry, our energy and enthusiasm, our presentation skills. There always are going to be the few people who don't like us and give us the low scores, but for the most part, people seem to really think that we're doing a good job and that they're learning a lot from us, which is great. And then we also asked them how they felt that it compared to other classes. And what we found from this that was really interesting is about half of the people had never taken any of these classes before. And I think it's because we're teaching such sort of a non-traditional group, people that typically maybe wouldn't get this kind of training. So that was really great to know that we're giving this kind of knowledge and everything to a lot of people that wouldn't typically get it. And then pretty much everybody else said it was either just as effective or other classes they've taken, even in-person ones, or they thought that ours was a little bit more effective. And then I always ask at the end, do you think that this actually helped you with handling all these situations that you're likely to encounter? And an overwhelming percentage of people said yes, which is great to hear. And then where are we going from here? Now that we've been working on this for quite a while, we've gotten our way through a bulk of the training that we're going to do. Barb and I have been working really hard to see if we can figure out an actual virtual proctoring service. There's a lot out there, so we've been working really closely with one for a while, and they're really cool. They integrate all sorts of technology. And this is, I think, becoming sort of a way of the future. Just also colleges are using these and everything. So it's a pretty cool way that you can proctor exams virtually. We're also hoping to eventually extend this to train the trainer. So Barb and I have been paying attention to sort of our star students in a lot of our classes in each agency, as potentially being able to train them to be the trainers for those specific agencies. And then also something that came out of this that's been really cool is Barb and I actually getting to help people figure out what sort of individual policies they want for their agencies, or what our sort of recommendations are for them. So that's been really cool. Yeah, and just to thank you, we've had the best team. Obviously, we love Kathy. Roddy has helped a lot with a lot of this tech stuff. Gabby, she's also community outreach. She's just awesome. And then Barb, my partner in crime. And then also Dawn, you're the best. We got so much awesome content from you, so we really appreciate you. And that's all, unless anybody has any questions.
That's great. Thank you all so much. I love the way, this conversation began with, because of the pandemic and because of this industry growing by leaps and bounds, there's so many people that are being thrown into it that really, it wasn't their intent to be in the alcohol industry or to be selling alcohol or to be working with alcohol, but everybody wants alcohol. And so how can we do it safely? And they're probably not the people that would have been trained or pay for training, because they're not working in a restaurant per se, or in the industry. So it was meant to be a different group of people. So so this is a limited program, but love to steal some of the ideas and see as we finish this up how what the numbers look like. But the data is great. So thank you all so much for that information. It's and thank you for doing during a pandemic. How awesome, all of you. It's great. So thank you so much. And Lastly, I have Missy Johns here, and she works for Montgomery County for alcohol beverage services, and she began working in ABS at the time. It was the DLC, Department of Liquor Control, in 1987. Sorry, Missy, that's hate to talk about years, but you were back then you were a liquor store clerk while attending the University of Maryland. And over the years, you've worked your way through different divisions of ABS, gaining knowledge in customer service, purchasing, pricing, and licensing. Missy works with new and transfer applicants currently, helping them prepare for the administrative hearings before the Board of License Commissioners. Missy, could you tell us some of the things you've done to manage the process and to assist the licensure manager and the Board of License Commissioners for hearings and prepping people?
Sure. Good afternoon. Thanks for allowing me to join today. So I, based on what Kathy's kind of created, we do have a pre-license kind of a program that we run, and we kind of take the applicants as they first apply in Montgomery County for an alcohol license, kind of hand-holding and working with them, and that's my prime goal of getting them to the hearing, learning as much as they can while they're in the process, taking classes, our alert class that we offer in Montgomery County for free. And to kind of piggyback on what Nick was talking about, during the COVID, we transitioned our hearings virtually, which, as many of you know, was difficult, especially in the beginning, getting people to learn how to use the Zoom platforms and the Microsoft Teams platforms, getting people to join, show up, use their cameras, be able to be heard. And so working through all that transition with our licensing team, we do have a Board of License Commissioners ID test that our board gives to each applicant that is applying. They do have to take that test and pass it in order to be approved and granted their license in Montgomery County. So in transitioning the hearings, the board initially put the ID test in the hearing, and it was kind of delaying the hearing, making them a little bit longer. They were overlapping, and also the next the next applicants that were coming up could see the ID test, so they could kind of practice or jot down notes, take pictures. That's been very popular. People love to take pictures of the presentations, and so we were tasked with trying to do the ID test and try to figure out something else. So with our team and our board, we decided, because they didn't want to take that important component out of our hearing, that we would take that and put it in the pre-license, which is what I do, the pre-license goal of getting the people trained and to their hearing. So I just made a little PowerPoint. It's just 2 screens, just to show you kind of what we've done so far. So transitioning that, the ID test, we have taken it actually out of the hearing, and I personally do it one-on-one with each applicant. It's either a manager or the person who's going to be in charge of the day-to-day operations of the business. Most times it's not the applicant themselves, unless they are the manager. So our team transitioned this, and now we do it through Zoom. And thank you, Roddy, for helping me. And you can advance to the next screen, please. So Roddy has been very helpful in making these ID tests possible for our board. So Montgomery County, the Liquor Board Commission does require the manager or the person who will be in charge of the day-to-day operations to take the ID test. When the hearings were in person, the ID test was given in person by the board, in front of the board, and the person would have to stand up and take the ID test, and it would be graded and announced if they were passing or failing right in front of them at the same time. So, and like I said, each business does have to pass this test before their license is granted and they can move forward. It is part of the component of them getting approved. So when the IDs were given in person, there was 10 IDs. They included multiple state IDs and vertical IDs, and they could miss 2 out of 10 and still pass. If they failed, they had to come back before the board and take the test again. We would reach out to them and give them a little training, recommend one of the certified training classes or our alert class, just so that they could get some more training and get familiar. You can see one of those IDs there on the screen. That is actually one of the IDs that we use. There is, you can see that some of the numbers are missing and it's a little bit whited out. I do go over that with each of the participants because they're just basing it on the dates that they see in front of them. And go ahead, Roddy, to the last screen. So just a few facts about our ABS virtual ID test. The first one was done when we did move our hearings to virtual, and it was done on May 28, 2020. Again, we've done 113 tests, or I have done 113 tests individually with each person who is taking the ID test for the business that they are coming in front of our board to get licensed with Montgomery County. So 84 out of the 113 got 100% on their first try. So we do have many people out there that are very familiar with ID checking. The ID test takes 10 minutes or less. You know, they're very good at checking those IDs and they're very familiar with looking at them. So that's 74% passing with 100%. In a second, I'll have Roddy bring out an example of our ID test. I don't want to bore you with the whole ID test, but we do have 3 different sets of ID tests so that each person is not seeing the same IDs each time. And, you know, if there's 2 people that take it for the same business, they're not getting the same test, so they can't share the information. A couple cons. Some people don't know how to use Zoom, especially after this year of the COVID. They're still kind of unfamiliar, turning on their cameras, muting themselves, as you probably all have been aware of with all the virtual training that you're doing and the meetings that you're having. I have trouble having people show up. They confirm, they say, yes, they're coming, and then I wait for 15 minutes and they're nowhere to be found. And also scheduling, because they're out in the industry working hard. A lot of times I try to, you know, be compassionate about their schedules. So I have to schedule something with them when they're available, when they can go into a quiet room or they can be home, just so that they have time to do the ID test. I do have a lot of people that use their phones for the ID test, which is kind of difficult for them to view the ID because it's a little bit smaller, so they have a hard time seeing it. And also they have a hard time because they can't touch it up and pick it up. We're not really verifying that it's a false ID or that it's been changed in any way. We're just making sure that they can read the IDs with all those dates on many of the IDs, learning how to read them and learning how to read the vertical IDs as well. Some of the pros, it's very helpful to work one-on-one. I've been noticing that people are more likely to have questions, go over and then be able to explain their decisions on why they would accept or not accept the ID, you know, more detailed explanations. And I can go over, remember to check this. If they have questions about an ID or where the dates are located, I can let them know those things as well. Whereas in person, they were just taking the ID test, looking at it themselves quietly and deciding for themselves a yes or no for each one. So this gives the liquor board a lot more time to qualify their applicants and not have to deal with doing the ID test, taking up time, you know, having any glitches in the system, you know, trying to bring up the ID test and having the other participants that are coming in afterwards view that ID test as well. Even though we have 3 different sets, you know, it was getting very complicated. So that's helpful for the board. We do let the board know prior to or at the onset of each hearing who took the ID test and what the results were. So they do have that information, and they are very appreciative of that information, because they are very vigilant on explaining how important it is to check the IDs for a Montgomery County business coming in. And then we have multiple tests for multiple applicants at one place. So I can do ID tests for, 5 or 6 hearings that are coming up. I can get those all done in one day, back to back, and get those out of the way so that they're done for the hearing, and then the board is ready for that information. So those are the pros and cons. I've enjoyed learning how to do this with Zoom and working with all the people. I've learned a lot by asking them questions and them telling me interesting things. And if Roddy, if you want to just bring up a little sample of the ID test that we do. Like I said, we do out-of-state licenses and vertical IDs. So you can see where the name does look like it's been changed. At the top there, it's a little more bold. But I do let them know that, that's not what they're actually looking at. They're looking at the date of birth, the expiration date, the issuance date, and saying if they would allow this person to purchase alcohol if they were in front of them in their business ordering some type of alcohol. This is a vertical ID, and again, I can show them where it says under 21. All the states in the United States do have that under 21 until, so I can let them know about that. There are some people still out there that are very unfamiliar with looking at IDs, and I think, like Bailey and Kathy were saying, this industry is drawing a lot of new people that aren't familiar with ID checking. They're more interested in maybe food, or in the, in the industry of opening up a new business, maybe selling, something specific that is interesting to them. And the ID checking is just a secondary thing for them. So it is a good training for them to have. Did you have one more ID, Roddy? Yeah, so this is just another example of the IDs that we share. And then I let them know the results at the end of the end of the test, and it is recorded. We save that just in case there's any questions or we need to resort back to that information, after the hearing takes place. So far, so good, and nobody's had any issues with that. So unless you have any questions, I appreciate you sharing that screen for Roddy. Roddy's been very helpful in doing the ID test PowerPoints for us, and thank you for your time and listening to me.
Thanks, Missy. That was great.
Thank
you. So we have come against our time here, but this is just, I think we just scratched the surface today of some of the great innovations and different workarounds that the boards have decided to either keep. They either stay or they go. We'll see what happens. I think hybrid models are probably what most people will end up doing, but as far as board hearings and such, but super interested in hearing what everyone's doing, and through surveys and maybe some of the comparative analysis reporting, we can scratch that surface a little deeper, and our Friday calls as well. So thank you all so much. It's great information, and I know it's just you didn't have a lot of time, but it is really great to hear. So I'd like to thank all of you. What a great day this has been. Learned a lot, and can't wait to see everybody in person. Also, if you have any additional questions, for any of the panels, please put them in the chat and we'll get back to you. I would like to congratulate the board, the new MALA board, for this coming year as well. And another congratulations to Mike. We'll be there for the adult beverages at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Tuesday for your early bird call. So we'll be there then. We'll meet you there. But thank you all so much. And I think we have an evaluation. If you can click on the evaluation, I would really appreciate it. And I don't know if that screen's going to come up. Roddy?
It's in the chat box, Kathy.
Oh, it is in the chat? Okay. Thank you. So go ahead and just click that if you can. We want to keep making this better. And thank you all so much for everything. Really appreciate it. Have a great day, and we'll get together again soon. Thank you all so much.